what the experts said when this breach initially happened at the DNC was that they believed that it was Russian state actors who took these emails. And what further experts are saying, and again, I refer you to the reporting on this, what further experts are saying is that then because they possessed those emails, that Russian state actors were feeding the emails to hackers for the purpose of helping Donald Trump.
Republicans are thrilled to see Democrats opening their convention this week, desperately trying to put out fires they themselves started. After 4 days in Cleveland, where America was talking more about a plagiarized speech and what exactly a pledge meant, this is now time for the GOP to hammer away at Democrats for their strategically planned methods of ensuring Hillary Clinton was handed the presidential nomination. And they are rightly going to get plenty of traction out of this all week and down the road into November. However, as this is the program that deals first and foremost in journalistic fairness and questioning everything without a partisan bend, we would be remiss in not mentioning how the release of Democratic National Committee emails was orchestrated by Russians, with all signs pointing to the Russian government of Vladimir Putin being involved. Someone who wants to see Donald Trump as president, and not because he likes him, along with reports and evidence that Trump and the Russians may be in bed together financially, with some calling this a favor. In other words, the Russians allegedly turning the American presidential election to their advantage. What's your take on this and the issue involving the DNC? Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Democrats planning to ensure Hillary gets the nod. Get on the line now. Get ready to deal out your comments. 1-877-Newsmax, 1-877-639-7629. Let's bandy about the stories, seek the truth. A pleasure to welcome back the globe-trotting journalist, author of the forthcoming geopolitical thriller Motherland, and foreign correspondent with an excellent eye on what emerges from Russia, Todd Wood. Joined by the former State Department advisor to John Bolton, former CIA analyst, Vice President for Policy and Programs at the Center for Security Policy, Fred Fleitz. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us. Todd, haven't seen you in a while, so let me go ahead and begin with you. Josh Marshall at Talking Points Memo points out that Trump and Putin, yes, it's really a thing. And there are others saying that, wait a minute, this was no coincidence whatsoever. Putin is trying to get Trump elected because he thinks he can take advantage of him. What do you think, knowing full well what goes on in the Russian government and what we've seen in the last 24 hours?
Well, yes, it's good to be back, Ed. Of course the Russians are active in our elections. They're active in anything where they think they can further their own self-interest and the interest of the Russian state. That's nothing new and has been happening since time began, basically. As far as Trump's connections to the Russians, yes, he's done business there. His campaign manager, Paul Manafort, is an operative who used to work with Yanukovych in Ukraine. So there are ties, but frankly, I think this is a big smokescreen, basically to take the pressure off Hillary because they were doing some things which were corrupt, and the world should remember that first and foremost, not necessarily, whether Russia wants Putin to get elected or Russia wants Trump to get elected, because yes, Putin may want that, but at the end of the day, Trump's going to take care of America and not Russia.
Now, to your point, you mentioned Paul Manafort, and Fred, I want to get your comments on this as well. He's the campaign manager. He did indeed tie this leak to Hillary's email problems, and there was even some who were asking him about his alleged connections to the Russian government. Here's what he said.
They should be concerned about the leaks of from the Democratic National Committee. It put the Democratic National Committee at risk and exposed the fact that it was a rigged political primary system against Bernie Sanders. But our concern is broader than that. Just think about a server, unsecured server, sitting in a closet in Hillary Clinton's home in New York. That was even more vulnerable than what was going on at the DNC. And just think of the national security issues that were most likely hacked and are sitting in foreign countries' vaults of information.
Fred, there's a lot of talk out there today, and I mentioned this to Todd. I want to bring this up with you as well. Those people who say that, wait a minute, how Donald Trump's been blackballed by all the major U.S. banks. One of his developments in Manhattan got financing from Russia and Kazakhstan. Putin has aligned all the Russian state-controlled media behind Trump, and there is an effort here, maybe even a payback, with some money perhaps changing hands underneath the table. You buying any of this at all, or you just see that as a smokescreen as well?
I think I see it as a smokescreen, Ed. Realize that wherever these emails came from, the Russians didn't write them. They were released by Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, not the Russians. And the reason these emails are out there is because DNC officials did not protect confidential information, just like Hillary Clinton didn't protect classified information in her private email server. And my concern is that if Clinton wins the elections, these DNC officials will be inside the government, and they have proved to us they can't protect classified information.
Do you think then that all of these leaks out there, the Russians, Fred, have a lot more, and this is just tip of the iceberg? They will wait till this proper moment. Maybe it's not even just Hillary Clinton. Maybe they also have something on Trump, but do you believe that they have more on Clinton and they're just holding off?
Well, Assange says he has more with
Right.
Wikipedia. And we don't know where he got these emails. He may have gotten them from the Russians. He may have gotten them from the Chinese. Maybe he got them from American hackers. We don't know.
So, Todd, let me come to you then with all this. There's a thinking process that Putin wants Trump in office because he believes that he can mold him to what Putin wants, even though the Trump people would take great umbrage with that. But when you look at the NATO comments that were made last week, people believe that Putin now sees an opening and he can take advantage. Donald Trump basically wants to get involved in NATO. That would seem to work right down Putin's alley because he says you make NATO a little bit weaker, certainly helps us.
Well, the thing we have to remember is that we're broke. We owe $20 trillion. Soon we'll be at $30 trillion. We can no longer afford to support the defense of Europe all on our own and pay more than our fair share, if you will. Yes, Putin would benefit from us pulling out of Ukraine, or especially NATO. But frankly, I think this is a negotiating tactic. Trump is nothing if not a deal maker, and he is putting pressure on the Europeans, letting them know that they need to step up and pay. I highly doubt that the United States of America would not defend our NATO allies, whether we would talk about renegotiating the treaty down the road or whatever, but we frankly cannot do that. We have treaty obligations at this point.
Todd, I know that you know an awful lot of what goes on overseas. Trump's comments last week to the New York Times about NATO, it's the ones that really alarmed a lot of people. How do the Europeans see in America under Donald Trump and the NATO countries themselves? Are they worried about this, or did they just see this as the price of doing political business and it's nothing to get that excited about?
Well, let me tell you something. Germany, a couple weeks ago, said only a couple or 3 dozen of their combat aircraft are operational. This is 2 years after Putin invaded East Ukraine with, the separatist or mercenary army or whatever you want to call it. Europe is not paying their fair share. So they need a wake-up call, and this is exactly what is happening. And yes, they should be worried. They're going to be forced to, step up to the plate financially. And at the same time, they're not paying their fair share militarily. They have, come against us with the EU as far as economics and trade are concerned, and taken our companies like Google and Microsoft in antitrust actions, trying to break apart our competitive edge. So they're sitting under our security umbrella and fighting us economically. So I think that's Trump's point, and this is all a negotiating tactic.
Fred, when you look at it, do you also see it as just a negotiating tactic, or do you see it as something a little bit more serious from Donald Trump when it comes down to NATO?
I think it's a negotiating tactic, and I think it represents that Mr. Trump's positions on many foreign policy questions will be further developed when he puts together and announces his national security team. I know some of the people who he will be working with. I think he's going to have a very strong team, and I think some statements like this, what Mr. Trump said about protecting the Baltic states in NATO, for example, I think we're going to have some very different policies if he's elected.
When we get down to brass tacks here, Fred and gentlemen, I'm going to ask you both very briefly for a quick comment here, then I have to grab a couple of phone calls here. Fred, do you think that Donald Trump would be the best thing for American defense overseas, or do you believe something else?
I think Mr. Trump has to have a strong national security team. I see the makings of that right now. There's some very strong people. I hope he gets on board, and I'm optimistic that he will have a strong foreign policy if he puts these people on his team.
When you look at the view from overseas, Todd, do they look at Donald Trump as the man that they fear, and perhaps rightly so?
Well, I think they understand he's going to put this country first. I mean, we are going to be very weak right now economically or militarily if we can't get our economic house in order. And that's what Trump is going to do. That's going to make us much stronger in the long run. Obama pulled all the armor out of Europe. NATO is very weak right now. He sent a few brigades back to Eastern Europe to show the flag a little bit. But NATO is weak right now, and we cannot do it all on our own. We have to have them rebuild their own defense capability as well.
What do we always say? Follow the money. Doesn't make a difference where it is or what it is. Always follow the money. Fred Fleitz, L. Todd Wood. Gentlemen, it's a pleasure to see you both again. I hope we get to do it again soon. Love having you on the show. Thanks so much. We'll talk soon. Let's get some quick comments here. Rosemary, Dubuque, Iowa. Rosemary, you have 20 seconds. Why does Putin want Trump to win?
Putin is a warrior in the classic sense of the word. he wants an opponent worthy of him. For him, there would be no glory to be gained in coming up against doing battle with the sheep. Putin prefers to do battle with the lions. I think he finds Trump to be a worthy opponent.
Finds him to be the lion, indeed. Thanks so much for the call. Michael's in Kentucky. You don't think Putin wants to meddle in American politics? 15 seconds. Why?
No, sir. I think that just another smokescreen, actually. Everything I've been hearing is just terrible. I mean, I can't get the truth out of media or anything. I've been a Democrat for a long time, but this time I think I'm going Trump.
We are going to find out about the smokescreen, yes or no, because this story isn't going away. Thanks a lot for your call. The lady who's been seeking an audience with Donald Trump for months to discuss a certain political matter. And your calls next on the